Let's get some analysis now with Mark Kenny. He's a politics professor at the Australian Studies Institute at the ANU. Mark, thanks for your time. Anthony Albanese trying to shift to a bit more of a positive message today. What did you think of the address? You were there at the press club.
Yeah, I thought it was a very competent address. I thought it was probably one of his more confident presentations. There was a good mix in the speech of, harsh critique of the government. There was some constructive stuff in terms of what Labor's doing. He wants to sort of head off this idea that Labor doesn't have any policy out there. He listed off a whole lot of policy ideas that Labor has put into place and compared that with what the government's announced in recent times and said, it's our long list versus their zero kind of thing. And this no legacy argument that he put forward about the government is one that I think Labor's going to be hammering. But the point about optimism is interesting too, because you will have heard Barnaby Joyce and other ministers recently referring to whiny elbow, trying to sort of characterise him as someone who's always negative. And this is about kind of, in a sense, trying to cut out his ground, make him look like a problem if he complains about the government. And so I think Albanese is very carefully trying to mix optimism. Our best days are ahead of us. We can be a great country. We can do reconciliation. We can do health. We can do a range of these things. We can get jobs growth going. Be very optimistic at the same time as running a very searing critique of the government. And
turning that critique into something where he says, and repeatedly today, learn from the mistakes.
Yeah.
To be more constructive, I guess, is the way that he's trying to pivot that message.
That's true. And I think you and I can see that politically, Labor's very much in the learn from its mistakes mode itself. The 2019 election was, thanks to Scott Morrison's very deft handling of it, was very much an election about the opposition, about Bill Shorten, about Bill Shorten's, rather large and somewhat unwieldy policy agenda. An election about the opposition may not be in the opposition's interest. Well, Albanese is not about to fall into that trap. Of course, that raises the other problem. If you're going to make it about the government, can you inspire people to vote for you? This is the question, I think. This is the balance that he's going to have to get as he works through this. To be able to run a critique against the government, make the election focus, do they deserve a fourth term? Yeah. But also, am I the person? Do I inspire you to vote for me?
There are balances that he's seeking to strike on a range of issues, including on the question that I asked him on China, saying, do you believe there will be a reset if you win the election? He said, no, I don't think that in and of itself would create a reset. But then went on to say that two things, that he supports the government, he does not blame the government for the ongoing difficult relationship, but then goes on to say that he praises China for lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. So a nuance and a positivity in that message that you would not hear from a senior federal minister right now, I don't think.
No, you don't tend to hear that from the government at the moment. So that does display a certain deftness of diplomacy, really, trying to have a message, but have that message wrapped in ways in which it can't be simply characterised as an attack. And I think a lot of Chinese ears will hear that and think it is good to hear our country recognised for this, as he describes it, the great economic and social achievement of lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. I mean, the Chinese diaspora is obviously very proud of that as well. And so that's an interesting measure. And he makes the point, it's not Australia that's changed, it's China. So I think that's interesting. But it's also fascinating when you think about it from the point of view of Labor coming to power.
And true, and it's also true.
It's true. But you think about it, comparing it, Labor coming to power in 1972. In 1971, Gough Whitlam goes to Red China, as it was called then. Yeah. Basically breaks whole new ground from opposition and reframes the relationship with China. It's interesting, 51 years on now as we are, Labor's going to be very careful about how it handles this, wants to look positive, but does not want to look soft on Chinese aggression.